This week on the Old School RuneScape Update, Leagues 5 Raging Echoes is finished. We discuss what we did, expectations, and if our theory crafting panned out. We also discuss Raging Echoes and how it compares to previous leagues. And finally, our takeaways and what does the next league look like. This is the Old School RuneScape Update, episode 62, recorded Friday, January 24th, 2025. Trailblazer Reloaded. Hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Old School RuneScape Update. This week we have our Leagues 5 post-mortem. I don't know why I'm calling it a post-mortem. It's not as though it was like that bad
dead.
That it's dead that we need to...
More of a debrief.
It's dead, Jim.
I mean, it's gone, but I assume Leagues will be back at some point. But that's Sirion here as he is each and every week. And also Dave, otherwise known as Arcane. Welcome back to the show. We had you on for the Theorycraft episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be back.
So
we had closed that loop. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
That's how you do it in like dramatic writing, right? You know.
Come full circle.
OSRS update. The story of this podcast was written since the very beginning, and we know exactly how it's going to end, and we're just delivering on that. And as part of that is the discussion on how Leagues 5 wrapped up, and we're going to do that this episode. If you want to follow along, full show notes can be found over at update.show/OS. We also, of course, have a Discord at update.show/Discord, and we have a friends chatting game as well that you can find at BitsBytes. All right, so let's just start this off here. We're gonna open the discussion with a bit of a brief roundabout on how did we all do. So which one of you wants to kick this one off? I had the least interesting story here, so one of you guys go first.
Sure. I can kick it off.
Yeah.
How do we do? I would say definitely hit my targets. I feel just generally overall in my path it kind of slogged a bit. That's due to my own fault, I think. I did get Dragon. That was my goal, right? I ended with 60,180 points. Exceeding expectations, I would say. Yeah, in the realm of I got more 50 mil skills than I didn't, for what that's worth.
Oh, that's good.
I think I ended up with 15 skills, 50 mil plus, and then the remaining 8, somewhere like 25. But yeah, I would say I didn't expect to go that far with that, but kind of coming down to the wire, it was really a scrape, and I just kind of didn't have much of a choice but to kind of trudge through and get some of those 50 mils. And
so would you say then? Would you? We'll go to theory crafting in a second. I just wanted to ask. I know when we got together for the theory crafting episode, you said that Dragon was in general the plan. Was there a point throughout this entire thing that you thought you might not make it?
Absolutely. Last year, as I had mentioned in the first episode, I took Desert, Zaya, and Kandarin, went Mage, and I was really disappointed with how much was focused around raids. TOA wasn't bad. I was able to get some of those. I didn't get any of the drops, but I got a lot of the KC ones. And then Zaya, I don't think I completed. I might have completed one realm one instance of Chambers, and that was a real struggle. So I was like, hey, I'm not going to pick raid zones. But yeah, I finished Dragon last year, a couple days before Christmas, and this year, I literally got Dragon on the 20th. So like 2 days. January 20th, rather. So 2 days before the league ended. So I really stretched it out, and I felt like I played quite a bit. So yeah, it definitely really came down to the wire. And I don't know, there for a couple weeks, like around New Year's, I was like, wow, I was sitting around like 42,000. I hadn't even hit Rune yet. I was like, man, this is going to be a real.
Oh my God, you weren't even at Rune by January?
No, but that leads me into kind of the theory crafting part. It's a little self-imposed.
Yeah, how did the fellow Kandarin picker do? We are the 2%.
Yeah, yeah. I'm kind of putting my foot in my mouth with that. But again, that's my own fault.
No, I
That's
mean,
no fault
like
of design.
I think it's a perfectly fine region.
Yeah, no, it is. I think I was kind of caught off guard with how little of an impact Echo Bosses would have in terms of points. I was focused too much on that, and I had kind of solidified my choice in. And then the 2 hours before the league dropped, they dropped the tasks, and I read it and I was like, wow, there's only like 1,200 points total in terms of like getting kills and equipping the items from the Echo Bosses. So I got really hung up on that. Looking back, I think I would have gone Varlamore because I probably could have taken on Soul, and it would have just been a little bit more, at least point pool, so to speak. Because Kindred, I think, had the least amount of points, so that really kind of, I came up short there.
Yeah.
A fun fact, though, is I was a little bit over Rune, and I had still not killed any Echo Boss. So I was like, you know what? I'm already this far. So fun fact, I didn't even attempt any Echo Boss. It took Kandrin, Tyrannwyn, Asgarnia.
And to me, that's fair. I think with that, with the boss.
Right, and at the end of the day, I mean, to be fair, all of my Echo Bosses didn't really. Their drops wouldn't have really synergized with my build anyway because I went range. So I literally just went 0-6-0. I didn't even have any points in any other things because I obviously didn't kill any Echo Bosses. I didn't even attempt Zuck. But yeah, I did not attempt any Echo Bosses. But again, I don't think, I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, I was maybe 50,000 points. I was like, I haven't even attempted any of these bosses. Why not just see if I can get Dragon without doing any Echo Bosses?
That's
so
a
again,
good,
that was
that's
a little,
good framing on that.
a little self-imposed, but I think it's kind of a special little thing that I can, tell people, not to brag, but it's just
no,
like, yeah,
that's fine. That's fine. And I think with that, I want to, bring you in, Siri, on this and, compare your story to what Dave has just said in relation to this. Did you hit your targets and did you exceed expectations anywhere? And I'll bring this back to a broader theory crafting discussion because I think we can weave all of our experiences in on that, having two Kandarin pickers here and one non-Kandarin picker, and how all that tied together. So did you hit targets and did you exceed expectations anywhere?
I did not get Dragon.
Rune?
So I guess no.
Addy?
Oh no, I did get Rune. Sorry,
okay.
Yes, I did get Rune. I ended up, I think, with 48, 49k points. I'm a little bit bummed out. I think I would have had it in me. I think everything was aligned, and if I had played it just a slightly better, I could have made it. But fact of the matter is, I was on vacation for a week.
You were also sick for a bit.
I was also sick for a bit. I hit the Rune rank while I was on vacation. So that was around the 10th of January, I think. That I got back at 1.5 week left for another 15k points, and just looking at the task list.
Yeah. No.
I just looked at it and I was already starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel a bit. A lot of the tasks I had left to do were either, getting the 50 mils or starting to grind out bosses quite a lot, because I had done quite a few of my PVM tasks that were sort of quick to get in, right? Anything that took a KC of less than 30, I would probably have done, except for some of the harder bosses. So I was really going back and forth for a long time. Am I going to push myself? Am I going to try and get Dragon? And then decided just not to, because I didn't feel like I had anything more to prove. This is something I might come to regret, but it is what it is. I did max. That was one of my intermediate goals. I got all of my skills maxed. So I did get to actually wear a max cape for the first time forever. So that was a pretty good feeling. Where I exceeded expectations is, I think I came in a lot with the expectation of, I might be able to do Hespori if I'm lucky, right? Echo Hespori if I'm lucky. And I might be able to try out entry mode on leagues if I do really well and have the right clannies in. Raids, yes.
Tombs of a Masket, but also other ones, I assume, right?
I did both Tombs and Chambers. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, all of this went pretty well. I even got brave and did a few serious Colosseum attempts. Because I was like, if I can get to Soul and kill Soul, then I get the Echo Orb guaranteed drop, and then I only have to kill Soul on subsequent kills.
Right.
Which is probably, it's the Echo variant, but it's probably not actually harder than Colosseum itself. And there were so many points I could have gotten from doing repeated soul kills, because I think a lot of the tasks were balanced around doing Colosseum, and a lot of the drop rates are balanced around doing Colosseum. So just getting straight to soul and just grinding that out, it would have gotten me so much points. Ultimately, I managed to finish Wave 6, which is halfway Colosseum. That was already pretty difficult, despite having access to Last Stand every wave, basically, because I was just cheesing it by waiting for 3 minutes between each wave to get that thing off cooldown.
I mean, whatever works, I guess.
But it just got so chaotic, and I think if I had thrown myself against it for longer and gotten the right, lucky with the modifiers and all of that, I might have gotten there. It was just one of these things where I'm like, do I really want to, or do I just want to spend the last few days of leagues trying to do a few other things that I actually enjoy? So I don't know. It feels mixed, but I don't want to spoil too much of my conclusion, because we'll talk about that later. Yeah. But I did sort of exceed expectations in that, the power fantasy of leagues is real, and I got to do a bunch of things I didn't think I could do. I'm ultimately not super unhappy either with the choices I made. I think Varlamore is an absolute banger, as a region. I loved it before, and I would definitely pick it again next leagues.
Do you think it would work? It would work as well if you weren't doing a melee build?
I think there's still stuff for a ranged build. It's still really good because you get the quiver, of course.
Yeah.
So that's there. I do think it's gonna be a little bit harder because the bosses are so melee focused, but I think you could make it work.
Okay.
But in terms of general utility, it was not the first region I picked, but I think as a first region, it's incredibly powerful because of all the early and mid game content.
Yeah, and that, when you look at the content lists specifically after batch 2, that's what you see there. Tons of early to
exactly, and I'm really glad. I know. You didn't take raids regions this time around, Dave. I went the opposite. I'm really glad I took tombs and chambers. Not necessarily because I want to optimize for points, but I'm really glad I got to actually finish both of those and actually get some raids experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
and I think Dave's region set is also interesting too. Kandarin, Asgarnia, Taranwin. I don't know that that you would see that as necessarily a meta pick, but obviously it worked, and we'll see where that lands.
Were you the only player that actually finished the Western Provinces diary then?
Yeah, I would. I searched the tasks, and that was at the bottom in terms of completion on the wiki, and I actually did get that one completed. So didn't finish all the monkey laps.
What was the percentage complete on that one?
It was less than 0.1%. Yeah. So probably me and 16 other people, I would assume.
Wow. Okay.
And it's probably all alts, honestly. Let's be real, because I feel like everybody finished in 3 weeks, and then we're on their second and third accounts. Some of the people that I followed, I was like, oh boy, you're on your second and third account, and here I am still trudging away at 52K. So
yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
That's one thing that I found different this time than last time. So last time I felt like last time I remember still doing like region picks and relic picks around Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
Here I think I was like rank 8 within 2 weeks, like up to all my relics in like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So I felt just knowing a little bit better about, what are the quick tasks and where do you need to get, what should you save for later because they're more grinds. Knowing that a little bit better really speeds up the start. But at the same time, the moment you finish all the relics and you sort of finish all the regions, the whole thing just opens up into a blank slate. And I think for too long, I started doing really grindy tasks. I really started to focus on the skidding tasks, like getting EXP, getting the 99s. And ultimately, if I had at that point already had the confidence and started doing some raids and started doing some PVM, I could have gotten more points more quickly, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was with skilling. I took Terrawin, and I wanted to do the crafting, smithing, crystal method. But I didn't want to do that until I was 16x because I didn't want to waste the time. I had all the seeds, but I didn't want to do a lot of those grindy 50 mil tasks until I was like at that point where it's like, okay, now I can start maxing. Now I can start going for the higher skills. So.
Yeah, even then, I think I should have left the grindy tasks for like later, because I think, like in the end, a lot of the tasks I had left was like PVM stuff, and I think if I had done raids earlier, because I sort of procrastinated that because I didn't think I could do it, but if I had started doing it earlier and sort of built up the confidence and gotten actually good at it, I could have started properly grinding that and started maybe getting better at Colosseum and sort of build my way up. And I sort of started my own PVM learning journey, if you want to call it that.
Yeah,
late in the league for me to really get up to the top.
And that's the thing I see too, is that you could start the PVM stuff a lot easier than you think you can. In particular, when you even just look at, say, in the ranged case, the tier 3 ranged relic, or even just the general passives that are associated with getting to tier 3, that's more than you have in the main game, and that's just enough to get you rolling on the entry level PVM stuff. And if we're being honest, you can have that in the first or if not second day of the league if you play your cards right on that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, speaking of T3 range, it just reminds me I was going for my rune limbs pretty early on, and I knew that I was screwed and used up my RNG because I got 2 visages before I got my rune crossbow one.
Oh my god!
I got the limbs on like 24 KC, and I got 2 visages before that. I was like, all right, I'm done for the league. This is going to be terrible. So that was kind of funny. So I had a DFS at like 47 combat.
That's nice. It's a good shield to have. It's a good shield to have.
Yeah.
But you guys have talked about your targets and where you've exceeded expectations if you did. As for me, I don't think I actually set any specific target coming into this. I think I said, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Sirion, on this, I said I'm just going to play this for a week or two, and we'll see how I feel after that. Isn't that what I said?
Something along those
lines. Close, yeah.
So I guess in that regard, you could say that I did hit my targets. I stopped after I hit tier 7, and I have the exact point total here that I landed at. It's nowhere near anything like what you guys had, but it was about 18,800 points and 527 tasks. So that's a steal finish. And when it comes down to it, I think maybe I should have set a target to begin with, but it was really it was a convergence of the factors that I know how I felt coming out of last league, that I absolutely hated myself after playing that, and that Group Ironman had just started up 3 weeks before that on RS3. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to really set any targets for this. I'll just play it for a week or two, see how I feel, and then carry it on. But there was one big silver lining in terms of exceeding expectations is that, well, like Dave, folks who listen to the podcast are aware I chose Kandarin, and the Kandarin Echo boss was, of course, the Slayer boss at 93 Slayer, which I didn't go for. So I didn't do that one. But one thing that did pan out, and I didn't even know if I was going to be able to do the Echo bosses in my regions, but I was actually able to get a remarkable number of kills at Echo Calphite Queen and get that down to a science, to the point where I was mostly just using food unless I messed up. And I got a handful of kills as well at the Echo Dagannoth Kings through what we'll just call the brute force method. The brute force method on that. And, you know, I have mixed feelings when it comes to how ranged landed in this league, and I think that might have had some impact on how I felt about my progress at the end of the day, and that I guess that can kind of take us into the theory crafting. I'm just trying to think if there was anywhere else that I exceeded expectations. I know I talked to both of you fairly regularly throughout this. Were there any of the achievements I mentioned that I did that I sounded like I was overly excited about and I might have exceeded expectations on?
I don't think so, not that I can recall. Because I know we had, you know, dialogue back and forth on how we were doing, but I don't recall anything there.
Okay, fair enough. I don't think I probably didn't have anything else in that regard then, and that comes from setting low targets with that. But theory
you did like the theory crafting was interesting because I think you went back on that, and because you really struggled at some point with the choice for it wasn't.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to mainly talk about in theory crafting, and where I can bring Dave in for Kandarin and you for Golden God in, is that, you know, I had this plan that was laid out, and it dealt with pretty much mostly every skill. If I wanted to train each and every skill, I had a method to do each and every skill, and that necessitated effectively going for the Forager's Pouch for Herblore with Reloaded in that case. But the thing that I felt after making that decision was that I probably gave up on a lot of early points by not going Golden God. And I think that slowed me down to the point where by the time I got to tier 7, I felt like I just wanted to stop based on how I was playing it. So I think I might have changed that if I was doing it differently. And I don't necessarily know how I would, you know, feel about this looking back in time, because I was thinking, you know, where the herb's going to come from, that whole thing. And if I had thought, well, then I could just, you know, throw the points from Golden God. And what was the name of the clue one? Not Clue Compass, but the other one with
Treasure Arbiter.
Treasure Arbiter. If I had gone for those two, I think I probably would have got to tier 7 a lot sooner. And then, given the region choice that I had and the math behind ranged, I don't think, based on what I was doing, that I probably needed to go Grimoire, because I would have already had the lunar spells and the ancients. If I wanted those, would have had piety, and then just would have been missing out on rigor, of course. And with that, I could have went Overgrown or Pocket Kingdom and just got there sooner. And maybe that's the way I would have played the relics instead, and maybe that would have given me more momentum at the early start by going for Treasure Arbiter and Golden God. I don't know. I feel like those two changes are the things that I maybe got held up on the most. And the other theory crafting side of it comes down to the range choice. But let's hear a bit about your guys' theory crafting, then we'll bounce back on the combat styles.
I mean, I've got to say, I was we talked about, because when we did the theory crafting, we didn't know about Treasure Arbiter yet, but we were like, oh, there's gonna be a clue one, right? Especially Dave, you were
but we
like,
didn't know it was going to be that powerful.
And I was talking like, I might get it if it lets you do like emote clues without the items. And we were like, nah, they're never gonna allow that. That's super. And then like I think the day after the show went out, they revealed that, and I laughed out loud like at my screen when I read that, because like, what are the odds, right?
And you picked that one, right?
I did pick that one. Yeah, like running ahead on like, I will probably not pick the clue one next time. I picked it twice in a row now. I didn't terribly mind doing the clues, and there are some points in there, but it does get old, to be honest. It does get old.
Well, you know what this league and this last one have taught me in relation to that, even though the number of clues are smaller in terms of the points, is that I need to maximize my league strategy whenever I do it for whatever's going to get me the most points early on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think
and I didn't, and I gave up a few things along the way for that here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember. I'm so sorry. I remember last league. It was. I remember doing my clue grind pretty late in the game. This time I was doing it like between like. Like as soon as I got that relic, I was like slamming that out to get those quick points, the quick collection log stuff. So it really kind of shifted the meta for me, at least.
Yeah.
Were there any other, and you know, this is on the relics side of it, were there any other of the relics that popped up that you felt that, you know, maybe you should have chose a different set? I know, Sirion, you chose Corner Cutter.
Yeah, I think that's the only one. I mean, regret is a big word. I would consider that differently. In hindsight, I think if I had gone for Friendly Forester and gotten the clues, I could have gotten a bunch of points earlier. I did end up solving it with Overgrown.
Yeah.
And Overgrown was pretty fun. I mean, my farming was in the end by far my highest skill, because I had just had it sitting there in the background.
And I think the reason that would have worked so well for you if you did that is that you didn't need dodgy deals, because you had Varlamore and the thieving method there. And Forager would have helped you a lot with mixology.
Exactly. I did end up, you know, solving all of it without major problems. Overgrown did sort of get me back. But, you know, Corner Cutter, it's an interesting one, but I felt it didn't give me as much XP as last time during leagues, because I still had to
they had to tone that down. The whole agility
and that was
thing.
noticeable. That was noticeable. So that was maybe my only regret.
Okay.
Yeah. Other than that, I'm pretty happy. You know, if I had gotten Friendly Forester, the interesting thing would have been, you know, do I still need Overgrown? Ultimately, Overgrown was as much in the way as it was actually helpful.
Oh, interesting.
Because of the farming contracts working really funky.
Right.
Like sometimes they would detect it, sometimes they wouldn't. It sort of had to do with, you know, where you were and when you'd planted it, and I don't know. I think the wiki changed like every day with what the official, like what the actual logic was. I don't think anybody really knew.
Yeah, so when you got something that powerful and, you know, working around the edges like that, I think that's to be expected.
And I had to turn it off for like 2 weeks just to get to my farming contracts reliably. So I don't know. I liked the previous instant growth relic much better. That being said, I think the alternatives to Overgrown were
they weren't that good unless you
so there was Pocket Kingdom, which would not have helped me much. I mean, I did need coal in the end, but, you know, with Golden God, I just bought them with Tockel from the ore shop.
Yeah.
And, you know, other than that, herbs I would have had with Friendly Forest. So, I don't know. You know, there might have been other options, but I just think that entire Overgrown tier of relic was a little bit disappointing.
Yeah. And Grimoire, I think, was probably the most powerful for the people in Mauritania who didn't have Kandarin, who were doing melee and who wanted piety.
Exactly. I mean, I did miss piety. I'm gonna be honest. Like, having piety on top of all of it would have been amazing. It's a massive DPS boost, but
yeah.
So be it.
How about you, Dave? What relics would you have? Is there anything you would have changed on that theory crafting?
I'm gonna be honest. I am extremely happy with my picks. I think everything was solved very well. Everything kind of intertwined and synergized. I'm very glad I took dodgy deals because that was probably the most valuable one for me. Because of the underwater agility and thieving, able to get my crystal seeds, to get the smithing and crafting in Tyrannon.
I remember you talking about that underwater stuff on the theory crafting episode.
Yeah, and that's actually my highest rank in terms of skills because I did get 50 mil agility, and yeah. Some of these, like I said, some of these were a slog. I got 50 mil agility, and at the time of actually getting Dragon Cup, I took a screenshot, and I was ranked 274 in agility. So
wow.
Yeah, that was my highest one. My second one was crafting, actually, at rank 842. Rune crafting, I got 50 mil, and I was rank 814.
Without Guardians of the Rift. Amazing.
Correct, yes. And I was going to do ZMI, but that would have taken significantly longer, so I just got more...
No, and you had the Death Altar, so I think that's
correct.
Obvious.
Yep, so that's what I went with. But yeah, almost all of my skills are sub 100,000 rank, so a lot of them are sub 10k rank. But no, I think everything synergized very well. I know I was talking originally going to go Overgrown, and a couple days before League Drop, we were talking, and you had kind of teased the idea of Pocket Kingdom, and that's what I ended up going, and I think that worked out really well because I didn't have a farming relic, and that was my primary source of herbs to get herb lore.
And plus, also, I remember you mentioning the coal too as something that would help. So
I actually didn't do any coal at all because I picked the mining, the pickaxe, so that was kind of solved with that, and the smithing was done with the crystals. But yeah, Pocket Kingdom was my primary source of herbs, and then mahogany logs, which I used to get 50 mil fire making. That was not originally in the plan, but here I was, and that was my least solved skill, and I ended up getting 50 mil on that. But no, everything worked out very well. I went Guardian last year. I went Guardian again this year. I think it's just a super cozy method for Slayer and any other kind of boss. I'd rather have more of a sustain than just kind of every 3 to 5 minutes, just get this real big push. I know I was in the minority with taking that. But no, in terms of relics, I don't think I would change any of those. But like I said, in terms of region picks, no surprise to anyone, I probably would have swapped out Kandarin for either Desert or Varlamore. I took Desert last year. I do have quite a bit of experience in terms of the League's environment with TOA. I think my range build was more powerful than my mage build last year, so I think I would have been able to drop bosses a lot easier and quicker to be on farm status for that. I had the blowpipe, and if I would have taken Desert, I would have had the Echo blowpipe with that, and I think I would have just been a lot better in terms of getting points there. I did the Mage Training Arena grind. I did all the Temperos and Guardians grinds last year. I didn't mind those. So yeah, that's my really only regret. But again, that's self-imposed, and I kind of went into it knowing that I'm kind of on my own island here going Kandarin.
Yeah, we didn't necessarily know that it would be such a small number, but I guess, with the Echo Boss situation there and Grimoire, it really wasn't necessary in that regard. And, I'm kind of with you in that same path. In idea about Kandarin of maybe swapping that out for a different region is because I felt like I was running out of levers to push with ranged once I hit tier 6 ranged mastery. And that just, if I'm being 100% honest, that actually made the entire thing a lot more boring for me, having 100% accuracy. Well,
and I originally was like, well, I'll get to 99 farming and I'll quit. And after I got Pocket Kingdom, I started doing some farming. I got tree seeds and I was doing farming runs. And then I kind of had that eureka moment. I was like, I could sit here and do farm runs kind of the old fashioned way so that they don't have overgrown, but I wanted to go for construction. So here I was. I literally did 9,600 tall hedges in my POH.
Oh my. Yeah.
Yep, and got 50 mil construction
Right,
and
because
50
that is a
mil
Golden God
farming.
option with Asgarnia, so that
Oh
makes
my
sense.
god.
So,
I got 50 mil construction XP in less than an hour
oh yeah, yeah.
by making crystal thrones.
So
Oh,
yeah,
it was so much fun. Like people were in the chat and they were seeing like the mill so much mill XP milestones
oh yeah,
come by like more than once a minute, and they
yeah,
were like, "WTF are you doing
yeah,
over there?" Like I have never had so much fun as getting
yeah.
50 mil construction XP in the scope of half an hour.
Yeah, no, it's and like I said, I don't think I would change any of my relics. It's was while not every solve was optimal, it was enough to get me to where I needed to go. Sure, I could have, gone. Obviously, I did go Golden God, but I could have gone Fremi and like knocked out construction, but I wouldn't have had Asgarnia. So like everything kind of as I trudged on, everything kind of not what I planned, but kind of just fell into place, and I was really happy with that. And I don't think any other combination that I took in terms of my regions would have allowed me to get 50 mil plus and over, half of my skills and get there. And I think that's good because they, like they said, they trimmed down all of the points per region. They trimmed down the task in the region, but they raised the threshold for that. So that kind of enabled me, like I said, half these skills I ended up getting 50 mil in. I did not originally plan to, but I kind of was forced to, and I was able to because of those relics. So I'm really happy with that.
Yeah, and I think when you look at that at the end of the day, it really summarizes the whole thing about Raging Echoes is that you can theory craft all you want, but I don't think there was anything that was horribly bad and horribly wrong that you could take in this league. There might be things that are suboptimal, like what I did, and I could have had a better ranged experience if I swapped out Kandarin for Asgarnia for the Armadillo crossbow, Zarya crossbow, and Void, and that would have helped things along the edges too. Like Golden God could have helped along the way, and maybe the Treasure Arbiter too. But I think that's our through line with the theory crafting is that we had a good time, but nothing was too horribly broken. I don't think there were any wrong choices.
Right, exactly.
So, with that, I mentioned, of course, that I felt like I was lacking on levers with that combat mastery with ranged, in particular the 100% accuracy, because my only lever to push with that was range strength, right? And after I got the rune crossbow, I was kind of limited in terms of where I could go with the ranged weaponry. It was really only the Drygor blowpipe, and that was also another limiting factor here. But combat masteries, Dave, you went ranged. Syrian,
Yeah,
you went melee.
Melee, yeah.
How did that go, and what do you generally think of the melee combat mastery?
I think people underestimated how powerful melee was and overestimated how powerful ranged would be.
Yeah, that's fair. And how fun ranged would be. Like I said,
exactly,
I didn't have fun with it.
Exactly.
It was just there, 100% accuracy. It's fun on paper, but it's boring.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the difference between ranged and melee that I started observing is like I think what the ranged relic did very well is it made ranged usable in basically every context. But if you look at that and like sure, 100% accuracy will be a DPS boost, but I think if you look at the actual DPS boosts that Magic and Melee got, is they were more significant overall. And I think they doubled down more on their own strengths rather than making themselves a little bit more varied. And because I had picked the regions that did actually prefer melee to begin with, it was just a really, really good fit. And once I got my full Blood Moon set, it was just it was just a lot of fun, just continuously bang people with my macro hito. I know the name at this point of these weapons. I've been
good.
using
You were
them
banging people.
yeah. Sake Shane. But yeah, I don't know. I just had a lot of fun. I don't regret picking melee at all. There were,
There were a
the
number of
down.
viable melee builds too that I saw.
Yeah, exactly. For me, Nature's Reprisal from Echo Hespori was an absolute must. It solved fight caves for me, but also it solved a few important situations in leagues for me. So, for example, there's a few rooms in chambers that you absolutely need to have some kind of ranged weapon for. So, getting Zaya was, you know, necessary to solve my melee build, I would say. But
Yeah.
other than that, I had a good time with it, for sure.
Yeah, I almost wish we had a magic person on to talk about that. But I will say that
One thing
go ahead.
one thing that I did sort of regret in the end is I managed to get to 6-2-0 in my
Yeah.
combat masteries, and I had really wanted to get tier 3 ranged because that would have taken one tick
Yeah.
of the Drygor blowpipe, which would have been the same if you'd gotten to tier 5, and
Yeah.
tier 4 was only healing one. So if I had gotten to tier 3 ranged, I would have essentially been as powerful as tier 5 ranged.
And see, that's the thing about that Drygor blowpipe is it had the 2 accuracy rolls, so it was designed in that view to be someone's secondary ranged weapon who didn't have the T6 ranged passive.
Exactly. So that to me would have been very interesting, and that was one of the reasons I started trying Colosseum to get that third
Right.
Echo Boss kill. But unfortunately, I didn't push it, and I didn't want to push my luck with Inferno.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
When it comes to melee, I can't speak to myself. I know someone from a clan that I did a few raids with, Alex, did Magic, and he had an absolute blast.
Yeah, I know.
So.
I was
no
talking.
Pun intended.
I was
no
talking.
Pun intended.
I was talking to him as well, and he was hitting regularly into the 70s and 80s with it.
Oh yeah, he was basically saying, because he had a shadow at some point, and especially if there's like 2 people who basically alternate attacking because the shadow had a 2 tick attack speed. If you have 2 people doing the Tumican shadow on like alternating ticks, that's the shadow laser, and that's just so much fun because you at that point you're just wearing down enemies with like damage each tick from a Tumican shadow, which is absolutely
and I think we owe a lot of that about all the combat styles actually to the Project Rebalance stuff that we got this past year.
Mm-hmm.
So, what about you, Dave? Did I sum up the ranged mastery just fine, or do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, no, I think you pretty well hit the nail on the head with that. I don't necessarily think I got bored, but I also didn't really min-max my build. I got the blowpipe, I got Armadillo armor, and eventually got Zerite crossbow, and just kind of went with that. I eventually got all the Zerite jewelry, but I wasn't super min-maxing or super tryhard with PVM, so I didn't really dial too much into that. I got T6 range, and I kind of just went with that, so didn't delve too deep, but I think you hit the nail on the head. I wouldn't say I got bored. I was just kind of in like cruise mode to get points, so it didn't really affect me negatively, but definitely I feel like it was probably the most powerful. Just out of the gate, melee, I think with the right regions and stuff. I know a lot of people took melee with Kopesh and they were just melting everything, and I think that was probably the most overall powerful build. But just for kind of casual getting things done, with even like a rune crossbow, out of the gate, range was the best pick. I think Mage just fell short for multiple reasons this league.
Yeah. What about your Echo bosses? Did you do Echo Gauntlet, Echo Hunleaf?
No, I did not even attempt any of my 3 Echo bosses.
Oh, right.
So like I said, I didn't
Fair
kill,
enough.
but I also didn't even attempt.
And see, I think that also speaks to the thing that we see in general with the league here is that you can have a non-combat experience if you want to. You just got to,
exactly.
build the regions around it appropriately.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need to do what everybody on the YouTube says you need to do to get to the tasks and whatnot. That's the next point. That's the next point I think you want to make, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I think
with the relics,
that's
and the
one thing I really noticed, especially in context of so many. Like the player counts dropped off much quicker than last. Like it peaked much higher than last year. with leagues, but I felt it dropped off much quicker, and even like a few weeks in, the leagues worlds just felt empty. Like
I
looking at the
feel like
player
people were
numbers,
done by the first or second week of December in large quantity.
exactly. And I think a lot of that is also to owe from, I mean, in part because I think some things like ranged get boring, but also if you look at the recommendations, and especially in hindsight, it's very obvious to me. The recommendations that were made by a lot of the content creation videos is they were really optimized for short-term fun. And Golden God, I mean, it was a soul for me, and I think it had value long term. But you could say that, hey, it's a quick few points, but doesn't really get you as much value later into the game.
Yeah, it
And
gets you to that end thing like you were talking about, where the entire world kind of opened up in PVM and skilling and everything.
yeah, it gets you there quicker, but like doesn't really solve it. And I think some of the relics I picked, like Corner Cutter was another one of those, right? Like it's a really nice early soul for agility, but later on becomes completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that might be interesting. But yeah, going back to the Echo bosses though, because I did all I mean I didn't attempt Echo Soul because I couldn't even finish
Yeah,
the
that's
normal
fine.
policy. But the other two were, I mean, y- the fact that I am saying this, like if I had known I would say this at the end of this leagues, at the start of this leagues, I would have called myself mad. But I think the Echo bosses were the best part of this league.
You
Hands
know,
down.
I'm not a fan of old school combat, but I will agree with you. After, back in the day, killing upwards of 500 Calphite Queen in 2006 and never going back to the boss and coming back to it this league, having a new dynamic twist on Calphite Queen that's not just eat food was refreshing.
I'm if they were telling me that, hey, Echo Calphite Queen was such a success, we're taking the old one out of the game and replacing it with the Echo Calphite Queen, I'd cheer them on. I'm like, yes,
Yeah,
because the old
yeah.
one is literally food eating simulator, and the new one, all the damage is avoidable, but you do need a little bit more skill to avoid sort of the attacks. And it took me a good number of kills to actually um, do it reliably. If I
And
didn't have Last Stand, I would have died a few
yeah,
times.
and I want to tell you something, and I'm going to tell the listeners this here first, is that I got extremely frustrated with a lot of the just the oh, I forgot a hammer here, I didn't bring enough food here, I forgot a rope, that sort of thing. And this came across in my complaining to Sirion. It did, that, and you can attest to that. But despite that, and despite the grading, and you kept questioning, why are you still doing this? When I said I'm going to go, kill the Calphite Queen, you said, why are you still doing this? I enjoyed myself on that day there when I went and got the Echo Orb. Not so much getting the Echo Orb, but took the full 30 kills. But after I unlocked the Echo KQ, that was actually enjoyable and fun. Aside from the fact that my wrist was a little bit sore after, 30 minutes of it. But hey.
Yeah. I went the full I didn't went the full I went only 5 kills for the Echo Orb, got really lucky on that. But I did go the full kill count on the blowpipe, which that annoyed me. And then the kill after I got a blowpipe. And the kill after that I got a blowpipe. And then the kill and then it stopped. I was like, okay, so it's not a bug. And then the kill after that I got a blowpipe. And I'm like, the game is just taunting me at this point. But yeah, no, I loved it. I also loved Echo Hespori. Again, basically all of the damage becomes, not fully avoidable, but much more avoidable. The mechanics were interesting.
Yeah, you showed me the video on that. It just looked a lot more dynamic than the actual Hespori, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they did an amazing job. I can't speak to any of the other ones, but I've heard only good stories, I think. I think Cerberus was the only one that people were pretty meh about, but Yeah, I really hope that they don't throw away these concepts. I would love to find ways of putting these into the main game, and I would actually go and do them on my main character.
Yeah, I would too. I can't believe I'm saying that. I would do Hesperia and I would do Echo KQ again, and whatnot. So, do you think that Leagues needs to be shorter than the 8 weeks it was? Because you mentioned that they peaked, that everything seemed to peak earlier than it did last time. Do you think Leagues should be shorter, or do you think that's just the community content drive that was driving that initial push?
What was that you said?
Well, Leagues peaked. I feel like it peaked sooner this time, in particular. And I'm wondering if Leagues needs to be shorter, or if that was just the content drive that was pushing those player numbers, and the normies amongst us continued for the full 8 weeks.
I would say my response kind of falls into the next point a little bit. So it could be a segue. So if you want to go ahead, Sirion.
Yeah, go ahead. Then we'll move to
the fact that you're saying that implies to me that you probably have the exact same thought as me, which is that even as much as I enjoyed this, and maybe enjoyed this even more than the previous league, the moment I got all of my relics and I sort of got used to them, because it does wear off like all of the excitement, chasing the tasks did start feeling very samey compared to the previous league. And I think that is part of the reason I didn't go for Dragon, because at some point I felt I was just chasing the same tasks. And as much as I liked the combat masteries, and I think they should keep that, and as much as I like the echo bosses, and I think they should keep that, I do hope that they are a little bit more willing of really changing things next time around.
Because
right now it felt like, this was a success last time, let's just do a carbon copy of it. But it was a little bit too much of a carbon copy. There were some new tasks, but a lot of the tasks were the same as last time. It just didn't feel fresh enough. And I think, given that there was only a year between the two leagues, I can see why people might get bored of it.
Right, because when you look at it, it is Trailblazer Reloaded with combat masteries. Reloaded because of the combat masteries, because of the echo bosses, because of a pruned task list and a few other tasks added along the way, and change up the relics a bit. But beyond that, what do you do, right? It really raises the question of what the next league needs to look like.
To me, this has proven that just changing the relics is not enough to make it feel fundamentally
I agree.
Different. I think the actual game loop needs to be the same. I have a few other ideas that might change things, but I'll pass it on to Dave first.
Sure. So I think there's kind of 2 points I want to make, and I'll start with kind of the community engagement. Was this too short, etc. So their kind of sentiment is, like Rune is top 5%, Dragon top 1%, so to speak. When I finished at, like I said, 2 days before, I just kind of did the math manually, and after I was 60, 180, which is above the threshold, I was sitting like right around like top 3.5%, and that's after they raised their threshold. But that being said, I know a lot of people finished a lot faster this league. People like first week, obviously like top content creators and whatnot were, Dragon in like 3 or 4 days. Anyway, beside the point. I really think it's as same as they were 4 and 5. I really think it's kind of apples to oranges comparison. They wanted to raise the threshold, but they also made things a lot easier in terms of like echo bosses and stuff like that. People were getting Kopesh on like the 8th hour of leagues and just blazing through so fast with that. So I guess I don't want them to think, everybody got, finished a lot faster. And then they're like, okay, this league is going to be 4 weeks, but then they changed the mechanics of that so that it could slog on a lot more. It may not be as fast as like Echo Boss is. Like I feel like if they do change the time frame of it, it needs to be like, okay, this is almost like a carbon copy. I don't want them to take this data where it's not really comparable. Oh, we need to raise the cap for Dragon to 65k, and then we're going to prune it down even more, but we're going to have a mechanic that is going to make it a lot slower. Then that's going to ruin it. I feel like it's just kind of, there's too many factors to like compare them. It raises a
question of who the league is for.
Right.
Like, is it a venture out for content creators to make media on it and raise the profile of OS, or is it for everybody to go out there and have your own power fantasy for 8 weeks?
Right. And I don't want this data to skew their design and layout of next leagues just because everybody finished a lot faster this time. You can't create a new league and then use the numbers from the last league to curate thresholds and relics and stuff like that. It's really just kind of has to be individual things like that. I don't want it to skew, because if you raise the dragon cap to 70k and you have a completely new mechanic and people are like 2 weeks in and they're just not even close to getting anything because they didn't factor that in, people will just quit and not enjoy it and then be sick of leagues altogether. So it's a real fine line they kind of have to balance with that. And that being said, I know I had talked to you a little bit, Shane, about this, but Trailblazer worked. I don't want to be in a rut of where it's just Trailblazer with like a fun new little mechanic with that.
Just adding extra reloadeds onto the end of it, right?
Yeah, that gets stale. And I understand it works, and you want to have an element of choice and pathing and stuff like that. Obviously, you can't really do a remake of the Zaya League because like that's kind of old content.
No, I think you
might
can.
Spice it up.
I think
you can.
I think you could. I think you could give everybody, Varlamore and Zaya to start off with and say, go at it. Or, tip the bonks really on its head and say, hey, Kandarin is the starting region.
Right. Oh, you stole that was exactly what I was going to suggest, a suggestion. I gave it some thought, and like Kandarin, like people are like, oh, please fix Kandarin. But if you think about it, Kandarin has most of the skills, at least early skills, covered, and I think that would be enough, I think, to make it feel very different if everybody had Kandarin as starting region instead of Misthalin. That's something I would be interested in.
Yeah, I know everybody said that this has been their favorite leagues, and I don't want Jagex to get like their mind poisoned or manipulated. Like, oh, this is amazing, let's just build off of this. It's like, yes, but also like change it up, and that doesn't mean, because this is Trailblazer Reloaded with fun bosses. Like that's really all they added. Yeah, the combat masteries, but I don't think that's really much to like. You can't keep building off that. It's going to get so stale, and I hope they still keep that element of choice and customization, but let's just not have reloaded, because then it just becomes like, okay,
unfortunately, Jagex has said that they want to use the Trailblazer model as their base and then just build off that in the future. Like, that's the thing. They already said that this is what they want to do, because Trailblazer is always a success. But that, I do agree, it's already started. Do I think this league was better than the previous one? Yeah, I think the combat masteries are an improvement. I think the acro bosses were an improvement. At the same time, I did start to notice that at the end, I was like, okay, I'm kind of ready for something really new and unexpected.
Yeah, my question was going to be, we get to the Summer Summit at the end of August. What do we do if there's another league that's announced that is, effectively going to be Raging Echoes, but change the Echo bosses and add in a new mechanic?
Echoes Reloaded.
And see, that's the thing. But hey, maybe as long as people are having fun with it, as long as people are playing with it, and as long as people are making content with it, maybe that's all that matters.
Yeah. Maybe that's why this leagues was called Echoes, because all of the future version are just going to be Echo.
That's a very disturbing thought. Biggest takeaways, Sirion.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I have basically completely shifted what I want to do on my main as a consequence of this leagues. Things I know that my league's character was overpowered and that none of this will be as easy on the main game, but I do want to give PVM a more serious try. Despite let's look at the Colosseum, for example. The fact that I managed to get through half of Colosseum with very little practice, and I was able to do things like the Manticores, where you basically have to flick between 3 prayers very quickly. Not like with 100% success rate, but more than 50%. Which I think is pretty much, it's like 1 tick or 2 tick perfect. It really bolstered my confidence in like, hey, these things that a while ago sounded impossible and absolutely crazy might not be so impossible and crazy after all. So my biggest takeaway is to just go and start doing these things a little bit more in the main game. I'm getting to the point where I'm an end game player. Why not just go and do all of this stuff and learn it? And yeah, that's really it, I think.
Yeah, that's good.
Go and believe in yourself and just do these things.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Whereas for me, it's actually kind of the opposite in that I really don't want to do old school PVM based on my experiences in this league. And that's just due to personal preferences and the way the game is built. And, I understand there are people who like it, but it's just not for me. But, on the flip side, and, I needed to take, ever since I stopped at the end of December, I took pretty much a 3-week break off of old school. I didn't even log in. I didn't know what the future was going to be as a result of the league in terms of how I felt about it. But I've started looking at the skill list again, and I actually feel refreshed heading into January for some of the skills. So that's a positive thing. That's a good thing. We'll see where that goes. You'll hear more about that as we progress through the month here on the show. But that's not the biggest takeaway. My biggest takeaway is that, when it comes to things like leagues, is that I need to focus, and I said this last year after Trailblazer, I don't know why I didn't fully execute on it this time. I need to min-max the points, whatever's going to get me the most points earliest to open up that slate of things that are open. I don't think I did that effectively as I could this time. So if there is another league that I take part in, that's something I will definitely be taking away from this and doing differently next time. I answered our next question there too in that one, but that's okay. But in any case, more min-maxing.
Yeah. It's really interesting. One thing that I also noticed is how I was, up until Christmas, absolutely addicted to leagues. I would find any spare moment to play, so...
I think my biggest takeaway, ironically enough, I picked Kandarin, is to not be as tunnel vision about points, even though that's my main goal. I was really just focused in on points and like easy points, so to speak, and not kind of a general overall more cohesion. I think I need to not tunnel vision on points, look more at the bigger picture. I think I did very well in my theory crafting with my relics and all of the skill solves. But I really think that... it was kind of irritating to me because, League's Raging Echoes, the whole point of it is like the bosses and stuff, and just all the creators and stuff I follow were just like obsessing over like min-maxing DPS. I'm like, here we go, PVM-scape, blah, 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 blah. Like, I want to go for points, I want to skill. And I just kind of turned a blind eye to like, I'm not min-maxing for 0.5% in damage. And I really just kind of went for points and content that I like. And ultimately, in not a bad way, paid the price, up playing till the second day before it ended. I didn't have that overall cohesion. And even, 2 hours before it went live, I didn't have that ability to kind of make a on the spot call where it's like, hey, these echo bosses are like 1,200 points, like mix it up to what's my next region. It's nice to have like backups and kind of plan a little bit more in terms of backups if when the task list is released, like, does my current pick make sense, or do I just look in and be like, okay, I can do this, do that? It's just to kind of have a couple backup options a couple hours before to maybe fall back on, because I was just locked in on that. And like I said, I could have taken Desert and probably finished a week or so earlier, even with my quote unquote like fears of having too much in raids. So I think my core takeaway is, ironically, don't think you know how to play a game mode better than the developers are intending, especially Jagex. So I think they had the right idea. I didn't take my zones didn't really enable me to get the most speed out of it. I got what I wanted out of it, but just kind of think bigger picture and not be so married to an idea based on information we actually didn't have, until a couple hours before it started. So just kind of open my mind a little bit to the actual game mode and to take advantage of it, because that's kind of how it was designed. So again, my own fault, but going forward, I think that's what I will do. So
yeah, that's a good point. And on that same thing, maximizing just to get Dragon, that's something you can do. But I also know somebody who was just playing to have fun, and they chose Equilibrium and had a good time with the League. So again, what we said at the top of it, no bad choices.
Right.
Just be clear. I think maybe this is the biggest takeaway of them all. Be clear with yourself what you want.
Yeah, I it was interesting because I am actually thinking the exact opposite from Dave, and I don't know how well this is going to end up for me, because I know that when push comes to shove, I am super competitive, but I do feel I want to next time maybe just try and disentangle myself entirely from this idea of getting a certain trophy and just focus on doing the content that I enjoy doing. In the end, I think I had, the most fun learning how to do TOA, learning how to do chambers. And I felt like I couldn't just go and camp that. I mean, I could have camped that, but there were also easier points to get elsewhere. And I think ultimately this decision between, do I get Dragon, do I not get Dragon, do I give up on it, did sort of sour me on the last 2 weeks of leagues, I think.
So that's what you'd do differently next time then, is basically.
Yeah, exactly. I think I would focus much more on, not. I mean, I still want to set targets for myself, but I want to sort of decouple the targets from leagues points. My targets next time might be, finish Inferno, or some kind of personal achievement, which I think is much more interesting than this threshold. Also, because I think the downside is, Dragon is so final, right? Like, if you have that as a goal, it's very, you get there, and then what else do you do in the game? And for me, the moment I realized that I would probably not get Dragon, I stopped playing most of the time, which is unfortunate, because I think I could still have had fun with the game with, different goals.
You could have done more chambers or more tombs, or done whatever in a powerful way. So
exactly.
All right, fair enough. How about you, Dave? What would you do interesting? Or what would you do differently? I already said what I would do differently previously.
Yeah, I think what I would do differently is embrace the game type, even if it is PVM or something that I don't enjoy doing. Since my end goal is the Dragon Trophy, in my head, that's the biggest thing, since a lot of the league's rewards are tradable. Like, if I want to, I'll just buy them on the Grand Exchange. The trophies is something you have to earn, and this and I'm sure will be a topic for another show. But in terms of focus on doing the Inferno or whatever, in my mind, and this is highly speculative, that's going to be what Project Xenaris is for me. If I want to just be super overpowered, eventually, we can do a custom game mode. I can kind of learn stuff that way. Leagues for me is, hey, I want this like limited time thing that I earned. Like I literally do it for the trophy because I know sooner or later we'll be able to go into Inferno and, have a sword that shoots lasers out of it type deal and have that overpower that can kind of lead us into that. Not saying that, Sirion's approach is incorrect. I think that's wonderful. But just in terms of my outlook, getting something that is like that limited time thing, something I can show off, and kind of just is a monument to my sins, so to speak. That's what I go after. So I think if I would have embraced more of the, not necessarily being married to range or, being open to going melee and going kind of the BIS route of WTF, going wilderness, going out of my comfort zone, getting the Kopesh and just blanking everything that I hit, I think I would have been able to get that a lot sooner. But I just had this mental block of just min-maxing to the 0.1% of PVM. And, a lot of these people that did this, do Muspa in their sleep. They're doing Rex in their sleep. And I don't. So, I kind of realize my limits. But, the argument is, you're like 20 times more powerful and you can like AFK all these things, and I couldn't get past that. So I think whatever the next league is just embracing that game type, even if it's out of my comfort zone, because it's ultimately going to lead me to what I want out of the league the most. So that's kind of where I'm sitting at.
That's a good way to put it, and I think it's just so interesting that both of you have, almost opposite views on the way that you want to handle, just your general thing, whereas mine is more just, more min-max of early enough points to, unlock the game, so to speak, on that. And, we wind up and we end this spot here in January. We started at the end of November, and it feels like a lifetime ago that this started, seeing people run,
when I logged back into
my
my main, the browser window of welcome back to old school showed up because I hadn't logged in for such a long time. It was like, hey, welcome back after this long break. I'm like, what break? I've been no-lifing in old school for the past few weeks.
Well, to be fair, we did a quest in early December.
That's true.
And I've been on. I guess I've been on main old school more than you have in the interim. Then.
Oh yeah. Like the moment, because like when I logged back in after leagues, I was still in the bank with like half the quest items in my inventory from that quest.
There you go.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode, the end of Raging Echoes. Let us know what you think. Certainly not as controversial as last week's show. Thank you, everybody, for who let us know what you thought about that one. By the way, I won't bring that sour can of worms up again, but we'll be back next week for the usual old school RuneScape update, getting back into the update of the week swing of things, getting back into what we've been doing, the questing and the progress for that.
Yeah, and then we're counting down to RuneFest, so
Oh boy, that's big. That's a big day. We got to figure out what's happening for the show for that. In any case, Dave, anything else before we go?
No, I don't think so. I think it was a learning experience with leagues. I had a good time. I appreciate you having me on the show, and look forward to future episodes. So.
Alrighty, well, sounds good. Sirion and I will be back next week, and if you want the episodes delivered automatically to you, the best way to do that is to subscribe. Update.show/OS. We're on all the major podcast listening services out there: Apple Podcasts, Google, Pocket Casts, Spotify, and more. Forget that, not Google. They don't exist anymore. That was a relic from a different time. Just go to youtube.com/@OSRS update. That's what Google wants you to use for podcasts in this day and age. We would greatly appreciate your subscription on any of those services. And if it's on YouTube, like and subscribe. Helps us out. But we'll be back next week for another episode of the Old School RuneScape Update. See you next week, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
See ya.